Welcome to the Aligned Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Pooja Venkatraman. I'm a double Harvard grad, former BCG consultant, and now an executive coach for high achievers. On this podcast, we are going to tackle the 4 key things that you need to figure out in order to live a life of aligned ambition. Those 4 things are stress, productivity, performance, and purpose. We are going to make sure that you're driving your car in the direction that you actually want to go. That is the purpose part. We're also going to make sure that your progress along the road is consistent and effective. That's the productivity and performance part. And we're going to make sure that the fuel you're pouring into your tank isn't so noxious that it's filling your car with fumes and making the whole ride miserable. That is the stress part. Because if you can tackle those 4 things, stress, productivity, performance, and purpose, you can build the life and the career that you actually want. Not the life you think you're supposed to have, not the life that burns you out or doesn't fit quite right, but the life you actually want. One that fulfills your biggest ambitions and unleashes your fullest potential without sacrificing your sanity, your relationships, your authenticity, or your paycheck. A life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. That's what aligned ambition is all about. Let's get started. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the purpose part of living a life of aligned ambition. And I actually think the purpose part is one of the most important parts. I know in the last episode I told you stress is one of the most important parts. They're all really important. They all intersect. But I think purpose is really important because to me it's the primary one, right? So for me, stress is really important because it generates all your actions. The headspace that you're in then creates your actions and creates your results. It's very important to dial in. But to me, purpose is important as like the first thing that you work on. Even before you work on stress, even before you work on productivity and performance, checking in like, do I want to be doing what I'm doing? Do I want to be pursuing the goals I'm pursuing? Do I want to be going in this direction or do I not? Because if you don't even want to be going in the direction you're going in, performance is moot, productivity is moot, stress is moot. Right? All that other stuff doesn't matter because you're not going in the direction you want. So we shouldn't optimize your ability to go in the direction you don't want to go in. We should make sure you go in the direction you actually want to go in. So purpose for me is primary when it comes to living a life of aligned ambition. It's the first question I like to start with. And I like to have people ask themselves is like, before we start working on productivity, before we start working on performance, before we start working on stress, what the heck am I doing? Do I want to be going in this direction? Is this the path I even want to be on? Let's get really clear on that. And let's get that to a clear yes before I start working on all the other stuff. So I think purpose is super important. And it is surprisingly difficult to know what you want and to stay anchored and secure in what you want. You would think it would be so simple. It's like, oh, of course I know what I want. I want s'mores and naps and massages, whatever it is, right? But it's actually surprisingly difficult from an ambition perspective to zero in on what you want and stay anchored to it because of peer pressure, because of keeping up with the Joneses and compare and despair and what you see everybody else doing on LinkedIn. I was telling one of my clients this recently. I was like, when we were in middle school, I don't know if you ever had like DARE, the like drug abuse something prevention program, right? Like to make sure, you don't do drugs and don't, drink alcohol as a kid. And in DARE, they make such a big deal of peer pressure, right? They're like, oh, all your peers are going to be like, trying to get you to do drugs and drink and like pressuring you. I experienced very little of that in school. I was like, where peer pressure really kicks in as an adult, like in your 30s. I'm definitely feeling the peer pressure now more than I ever felt in middle school or high school. Like somebody should have warned me about peer pressure as an adult, right? And it's funny because nobody ever teases you, right? Or like makes fun of you, like maybe they would have done in school. But I feel like adult peer pressure is much more subtle, right? It's just kind of seeing what everyone else is up to, seeing their Instagram updates, seeing their LinkedIn updates, seeing the conversation when you are hanging out with your friends or you go to an alumni reunion or any of those things, right? Peer pressure is shockingly strong. And that can make it very difficult to separate your wants from peer pressure, right? And your brain being influenced by what everybody else is doing. And so it can make it very hard to get super clear and laser focused on this is what I actually want and feel solid in that. And it can make it hard to stay anchored to that and really stay true to that versus kind of wandering, right? And it's like, I like to imagine if you have a compass and your compass needle is pointing north, what everyone else is doing and what you're supposed to do is like a magnet, right? That you like put near your compass and it starts to tip your compass needle over to a different direction away from the true north towards, the magnetic pressure or the magnetic pull of what everyone else is doing. So it's a super simple question, right? Do you want to be doing what you're doing right now? Do you want to be on the path you're on? Do you want to be going in this direction? Seemingly deceptively simple question. Very, very important. To me, the primary question to answer before we start optimizing all the other parts of the machine, and surprisingly difficult to answer because your mental compass can be kind of clouded and distorted by the magnet of what everyone else is doing and peer pressure and compare and despair. So today I'm going to give you a couple of really simple questions that you can ask yourself. They're thought exercises that just temporarily remove the magnet of peer pressure, right? They take it out of the equation just for a little bit so your compass can snap back and you can just get a glimpse of like, okay, this is what I truly want. And then over the course of your day-to-day, that magnet might come back and you might have to keep redirecting your compass, but at least you can get a snapshot of internal clarity by removing that magnet, asking yourself these couple of thought exercise questions and just feeling like, got it. Okay, I know what I want. The other guidance I'm going to give you is as you're asking yourself these questions, I think it's really important to kind of just check in, what's your visceral first answer, right? Your visceral first reaction when you ask yourself these questions as they relate to different things that you want, right? Because your brain can then also start overthinking after your visceral first reaction, right? And it can start to say, well, but here's why what I want doesn't make sense. And what about this? And what about that? And et cetera, et cetera. It can pile on more overthinking thoughts, all of which we can work through, if we work together, or all of which you can work through as well. Those are all important too, but just for the purpose of getting a clarity snapshot, right? Just for that purpose, just jot down what's your visceral first reaction, right? And that'll just tell you, okay, that's where my first instinct is. And then we can work through all the kind of overthinking or additional thinking that my brain has. But okay, I got the snapshot of like, this is my first reaction. So these are the questions I want you to ask yourself. And then I'll give you some examples of how this means. But as you're kind of thinking or how this can play out, different scenarios you can ask it in. But as you're thinking about, do I actually want what I say I want when it comes to my next career step, when it comes to things in my personal life, when it comes to my goals? Do I actually want this? Or am I just doing it because I feel like I'm supposed to and everyone else is doing it and I'm being kind of peer pressured into it? How do I even know? The questions you can ask yourself are, if everyone was doing what I'm doing, if everyone was going after what I'm going after, how would I feel? Right? That's one flavor of question. The other flavor of question you can ask is, if no one was doing this, no one was going after what I'm going after, if no one was, pursuing what I'm pursuing, how would I feel? Right? So those questions just help you kind of strip out the peer pressure effect, right? To just kind of see, well, if everyone was doing it, how would I feel? And by everyone, we don't necessarily mean everyone in the world. We mean everyone in the way that your automatic brain means it, which is usually everyone in your peer set, right? Everyone that's kind of in your world, in your circle. That's usually what your brain thinks of when we say everyone. So, just asking yourself, well, if everyone was doing this, how would I feel? If no one else was doing this, would I still want to do it? How would I feel? And these are just things that help to kind of strip away the impact of peer pressure in your mind, just give you that little clarity snapshot, right? It just takes away the magnet for a little bit, and then you can see, okay, what do I actually think? What do I feel when we've removed the variable of peer pressure? What's my true desire that emerges when I just ask myself that thought exercise question? And we can talk about what you can do with that too. But I'll just give some examples, right? And different scenarios might make one or the other of the questions like more illuminating, right? So let's say, for example, you want to get a Tesla, right? You can ask yourself, well, like if everyone around me was all driving Teslas, would I still want a Tesla? And then you can also ask yourself, well, if no one around me was driving a Tesla, would I still want a Tesla? Right? And that can just kind of help you tease out, well, if no one was doing it, if you say, well, if no one was doing it, I'd still want to do it. That's a really clear example of like, that's a true want. That's an internal want that I have. It has nothing to do with what everyone else wants. I just want it myself, right? So that's one indicator of like, that's a true want, because even if no one else was driving a Tesla, I would still want a Tesla. The other question of like, if everyone was doing it, how would I feel? That can be, you can use that when there's something that you want that you're afraid to own, right? So I use this a lot for myself when I thought about deprioritizing dating, right? So we're now in 2026. For the vast majority of 2025, I just completely deprioritized dating. I didn't go on any dates. I wasn't on any apps, like any of those things. I went on a couple of dates, and then honestly, it just made me remember that I didn't want to be prioritizing dating, right? But it was also something I felt very insecure about. Right? I was like, ooh, is that like, am I making a huge mistake? Right? Like I turned 35 in 2025 at the end of the year. And so I had a lot of fear about like, am I just making a huge mistake? Am I doing this wrong? Am I allowed to do this? Right? And so in that case, when it's hard for me to own my desire, right? When I'm like, I kind of want it, but then I'm sort of afraid that it's like the wrong thing. That's when I asked myself that question was like, well, if everyone was doing this, if this was normal, right? And my brain couldn't conceptualize like all my friends being single, all my girlfriends being single. So I literally just asked myself, listen, if half my girlfriends were single, and not actively dating, right? If half my friends were like, yeah, I'm single and I'm not actively dating, how would I feel? And the immediate feeling I felt was like relief. And I was like, interesting. If half my friends weren't dating, then I wouldn't feel any pressure to date. Interesting. So clearly, what's driving me to date is actually more of the pure pressure that I should be doing this, that I might be doing it wrong if I don't do this, versus an inherent desire to go do this, right? And so in that situation where I was like struggling to own my desires, right, and own what I actually wanted, I asked the like, well, if everyone was doing this, how would you feel? And I was like, well, I would feel relieved and I would just do it. Got it. Okay, well, now I have a picture of what I actually want. I'll give you a couple examples on the other side, right? Where it's like, when I asked myself that if nobody wanted to do this, would you still want to do it? And it clarified my desires. So for me, this actually happened on the career side 2 times. One with being a consulting partner. I didn't actually end up becoming a partner in consulting, but when I joined consulting, that's what I wanted, right? I really wanted to be a partner at BCG. That was my career goal. And a lot of people were like, why would you want to do that? Like nobody wants to be a partner. Everyone wants to like stay for a couple of years and get out of here, right? And so but when I asked myself that question, well, if no one wants to be a partner, would you still want to be a partner? I was like, yes, I do still want to be a partner. Because for me, a lot of the appeal was I want to do thought leadership. I want to do advisory. Actually, not super interested in being an operator or being an investor. I really, really like advisory. I like to be an expert in something and then use my knowledge to help people. And so, yeah, my answer was like, even if nobody else wants to do this, I want to do this, right? And so that made it very clear to me, like, this is an internal desire. This isn't peer pressure. Because actually, lots of people don't want to do this, and I'm still happy to do this. I ultimately decided I didn't want to do it for other reasons. But at that time, as I was aiming for it, asking that question of, well, if no one wanted to do this, would you still want to do it? It was very clarifying, right? To be like, oh, I don't just want to do this because of the status. I don't just want to do this because I think this is the top of the mountain, because even if nobody else wanted to do this, I would still want to do this because of what I think the work entails, right? The advisory work and the day-to-day that I'm really excited about. If you're curious, the reason I ultimately decided not to do it was this is my personal opinion. I work with a lot of consulting firm partners. I think the job is great. But for me personally, I was like, ooh, I'm not super interested in the problems that consulting companies are solving. My personal analysis was what I think is a lot of the interesting work, which is more of the strategy work, has gone in-house, right? Most companies have a corporate strategy team that does what I think is more interesting work. And consulting companies are doing more and more of sort of large scale transformations that have larger teams and are longer projects. And for me personally, I was like, oh, I'm less excited about that problem and that kind of work. So that's it. That's the only reason I decided not to do it and to go a different path. But notice status doesn't come in there anyway, right? It's not like, oh, I want to be a consulting partner because that's the top of the mountain. That's the coolest, sexiest job and everyone will be so impressed. And then I find out it's not the coolest, sexiest job. And then I'm going chasing the next like top of the status mountain. Not at all. My thought was, well, even if no one wants to do this, I still want to do it. And then I learned more about the job and I was like, oh, this doesn't line up with what I want. So I'm just not going to do it. I'll also talk about the kind of size that I want to grow my coaching business to, right? I want to grow it to a multi-million-dollar business. I'm really excited for this to be as big, as successful, as impactful as it can possibly be. And so then I can use the kind of status checker question to say, well, let's just imagine an artificial world where everyone I know, all my peer set, everybody's salaries are just capped. Just imagine they're capped at like a certain level. Everybody's salary is capped at $200,000 for the rest of their career. That's just happened, right? That's just been determined. Would I still want to grow my business to a multi-million-dollar business? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Has nothing to do with how I feel like I'm stacking up against other people. Even if everyone else's salaries were capped for the rest of their career for some reason or the other, I would have the same desire to grow my business to that size, right? So those are the ones where I'm asking, even if no one else was doing this, would I still want to do this? In those, I'm taking something that I strongly want, and I'm just checking to see, okay, let's just separate. Do I want this because I think it'll give me status and it'll help me keep up with the Joneses and like look impressive on LinkedIn? Or do I want this because I actually want this, right? And it's like, oh yeah, even if nobody else was doing this, I would still want this. That's the clarifying one. Versus when I used it for not dating, right? That was a desire that I was like hesitant to own, right? That's not something where I was like, oh yeah, super clear. I know that I don't want to date. It was more of like, I think I don't, but like, I'm afraid to own that. I feel like I'm doing it wrong. I feel like that's not the right answer, right? And for you, it might be something like, it might be where you're aiming in your career. I worked with someone once where they were really interested in the finance function. And they were like, oh, that's the function that I think is really cool. But then they were kind of like, well, but I know it's like not as sexy. It's like not as cool. Maybe it's not as much like in the center of the action, right? And so the same thing, I would kind of ask them, well, if everyone you knew was in the finance function, what would you think? How would you feel? Right. And say, I suspect that person would feel like that relief, right? Of like, oh, well, if that's like the cool thing to do, if everybody's doing that, then right? That, okay, well, then I'm allowed to do it. Then I feel like I have permission to do it. I feel like it's okay. And so then I can allow myself to own it. Another example I could give, I was chatting with a client recently about, a lot of my clients are working parents, right? And they have parents of young kids, often kind of under 5. And so a lot of people are navigating, how do I balance parenting with my career, right? Because a lot of my parents, like I said, the clients are working parents. And so we were talking about, there's not a ton of examples that are sort of like lifted, right? Like in terms of they're interviewed on podcasts and they're showing up on panels and, they're like writing books. Like the examples of people that are really lifted in our society tend to be people that have like smashed it in terms of business success and career success, right? They're like C-suite at major Fortune 500 companies. They have like unicorn kind of businesses and startups. They're massive investors, right? Those are the people that are sort of lifted in our society, which tends to be people that have really kind of gone all in on their career and either have a crap ton of support at home, such that they may have a family, but they have a lot of support so they don't have to dedicate so much time to their family. Or they may just have deprioritized it altogether. And the examples that are not lifted in our society are the people that are like really pushing both, right? That have ambitions for their career and have ambitions for their parenting. And then they're balancing both of those. And so because they're like pushing hard on 2 extremely difficult work streams, their career is not in the same place that it would be. And it's not at the same trajectory that it would be if they were just pushing forward on the work trajectory, right? On the career trajectory. So they're like, I'm not aiming for the C-suite and I'm not on track to get there in 2 years or 3 years or whatever it might be, but I'm crushing it and really holding it down in a great job while being the parent I want to be. I'm getting like really strong grades on 2 simultaneous work streams, and that's really difficult. That's just not the example that's lifted, right? Like in our society. And so that's another example where I'll talk to people and they'll kind of say, well, this works. Like the way that I prioritize doing my career at this pace and at this trajectory creates enough time for me to be the kind of parent I want to be. Like this works. I just feel bad about it, right? Or I feel like I'm not quite doing it right, or like this isn't the choice I'm supposed to have made. And that's where we apply the question of like, okay, well, if everyone else was doing that, right? If everyone else was doing the exact same thing, how would you feel? And then people will often experience that like, that relief, right? That like permission giving, like, I'm allowed to do this, right? So those are the 2 questions I want you to ask yourself, kind of depending on if you have a really strong desire and you're like, this is absolutely what I want, then ask yourself, if no one else was doing this, would I still want that? Right. And that will just strip away any part of it that is actually kind of peer pressure or status driven and just help you tease out, this thing that I strongly want. Do I actually want it just for me, even if no one else is doing it? Or is there part of it which is like, I'm kind of doing it because like, I think it would make me look cool in front of my friends. Right. And then for anything where you are like struggling to own it, right? Where you are like, I want this, or I think I want this, but I'm having trouble like just being like, yes, this is the right answer. And I feel totally good about it. I'm having that hesitation and that back and forth. That's where you want to ask yourself the question of, well, if everyone was doing it, it's a thought exercise. If everyone was doing it, how would I feel? And notice if you get that feeling of like relief or permission granted, right? Who I'm allowed to do this. I didn't know I was allowed to do this. And all of these things, just based on the answers to these questions, that doesn't mean you have to like change your whole life and change everything. But like I said, this is just to give you a snapshot of clarity, right? Just notice your visceral first reaction to those questions as you're thinking about the thing you strongly want. If no one else was doing it, would you still want it? The thing that you want but are sort of hesitating to own, if everyone was doing it, how would you feel? Just note down your visceral first reaction to those. And that's just going to give you that snapshot of clarity. What we've done in your brain is we've just taken away the magnet of peer pressure, the magnet of what everyone else is doing just for a second. And we've let the compass in your brain just snap to, right? Snap to and point in its true direction without the influence of the magnet of like peer pressure and what everyone else is doing. So just take in that snapshot, right? That visceral first reaction for you to know, okay, got it. That's what I truly want. If I strip away the kind of influence of peer pressure, turns out that that's what I actually want. Just for you to know, right? Just for you to know what it is that you actually want. I think that's so important. That doesn't mean that you have to completely throw away peer pressure and status. I think the other thing to realize is like we're social creatures. Status matters. Status matters. It absolutely matters to us. And I think it's very hard to just become people who don't care about status in any way whatsoever. So I think there's 3 ways that you can think about status and how to like feed that part of you that needs it and not pretend that you don't have it. One is you can chase status. That's okay, right? It's totally up to you. You can decide this is what I want. But I think what's really important though is knowing that that's what you're going for. Because I think where people get tripped up is when they think they're chasing something out of a true desire, but it turns out they're only chasing it for status. right? Or they're only doing it because everyone else is doing it. Because what happens in that scenario is you get the thing and then it doesn't give you that satisfaction because you didn't actually want it. You just wanted to be able to tell other people that you had it. For me, I think this is very much like, this is why I really got very frustrated with dating was I was like, I had my fair share of like terrible dates, but a lot of dates that were perfectly fine. And I noticed that my frustration with them was really outsized, right? I was like, why am I getting so annoyed? Nothing that bad has really happened. But what was happening was I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm only doing this because I think I'm supposed to be doing this. And it's frustrating. It's not very satisfying to do something when you don't really want to do it. It's not very satisfying to achieve something if you don't want the inherent thing itself, but you just want to be able to tell people that you did it. I think a huge part of why that is because your experience of telling people that you've accomplished something is like 1% of your experience, right? If you get a big promotion, like 1% of your experience is telling people that you got the promotion or telling people what your new title is. And then 99% of your experience is like now being in that role and like operating at that level and being at that new level. Right? Or same thing with like being in a relationship. 1% of the experience of being in a relationship is being able to tell people, this is my boyfriend, this is my husband. 99% of the experience of being in a relationship is like actually hanging out with that person and interacting with them and being in the relationship. Right? And so that's why if you're chasing status without realizing it, that's why it ends up feeling so hollow and so unsatisfying if you get it, is because you don't actually get to like flex your status that much, right? Flexing your status is not like a huge part of your life experience. Most of your life experience is just like living with what you have. And so that's why it feels unsatisfying because you're like, well, I only spend a very little amount of time telling people about my role or telling people about the company I work at or telling people about my spouse or whatever it might be. Most of my time is actually the lived experience. That doesn't mean you can't chase status. Go for it, right? It's your life. You can chase absolutely whatever you want. If you kind of do the thought exercise and then you realize, crap, 50% of the reason why I want this thing is because everyone else is doing it. And because I want to fit in or want to feel like I'm on track, that's totally okay. You can do that. It is your life. It's up to you to do what you want to do. But it's helpful to know that that's what you're chasing, right? To know that's like, hey, I'm doing this because it's easier for me to feel like I fit in and I belong by just doing it. And I'm just going to own it and I'm just going to do that. And that way you at least won't experience the disappointment of getting there and then being like, wait, what the heck? Why am I not getting the satisfaction that I want? So that's one way to think about how to still feed your need for status, which is totally okay. The second thing that you can do is you can change your peer set, right? You can find your people. So this is why when I was talking about what if everyone was doing it, what if no one was doing it, your brain is not thinking about all 8 billion people on the planet in all different countries and cultures and generations and languages. No. When we say everyone and we say no one, your brain is thinking about your peer set, right? Your tribe. Your brain has this like fuzzy idea of who everyone is. And it's really just like your people that you're kind of like automatically thinking of. And so you can adjust your mental peer set. You can adjust your mental tribe by hanging out with different people, by going into different groups. So from the dating front, for me, I joined an awesome group at the beginning of this year called Thrive Solo. It's an online group for single women without children. And that being in that group, interacting, going to the calls, hanging out in the WhatsApp group, just like being in that group and hanging out with them a lot has updated my brain's mental peer set, right? Because before I joined that group, most of my peer set was either people that were already in relationships or single people that were actively dating and actively trying to get into a relationship. And I knew like maybe one person that was single but not actively dating, right? Everyone else was either coupled up or actively dating as a single person. And so my peer set like made me feel like everyone's in a relationship or trying to get into one, right? And so I changed my peer set, or I added a new group to my peer set. I added a whole group of women who are single and just are not thinking about it. They're not anti-relationship, but they're not prioritizing getting into a relationship. And so I adjusted my peer set, and then that made my brain feel much more comfortable and feel more normal. Another example from a career perspective, right? When I started my coaching practice, I started hanging out with a lot of coaches and in a lot of coach groups because I didn't know that many people that were becoming coaches in my own peer group. More people have become coaches in the last couple of years, but in 2021, I didn't know anyone in my kind of friend groups and networks that was a coach. And I genuinely was so afraid people were going to like think I was scamming them. Like I thought people were going to think I joined a pyramid scheme when I came out and said I was a coach. I was so scared. But I joined a lot of coach groups and met a lot of people that are coaches and that are actively building their coaching businesses. And then that made me feel normal. And I was like, great, I'm totally on track. I totally am normal. This is what I'm doing. Right. And so same thing goes for you. I've talked to my clients about this, even when it comes to their careers. For example, someone who was moving from corporate to being a startup founder.
right? One of the things that we worked on was them really building a startup founder peer set. Because what they noticed was with their corporate kind of friend peer set, there was much more of a mentality of like, oh, well, like I would never start a startup, like that's too risky. And like, listen, like this is life. Like life is, you have to have a corporate job that you don't really like, but it pays the bills, and like grow up and be an adult. Like that's what life is. And that's about as fulfilled as you can expect to be, right? That was kind of the mentality in their peer set. And they didn't love that mentality. So we actively worked on them going out, meeting more founders, meeting more entrepreneurs, and building a peer set that had a very different mentality around risk and what's possible and what to expect from your career and the level of fulfillment to expect, all of those things. And so they shifted their mental peer set so that then they felt like they fit in and belonged and were like, you know, on track with the group that they had sort of expanded their mental peer set to include, right? So this is really important because your brain is not thinking about all 8 billion people in the world. When you think about what if everyone was doing this, what if no one was doing this, your brain has a much, much smaller than 8 billion peer set in its brain that it's really thinking about. And you can trust that by hanging out with people and hanging out with people that are doing the things you want to do, that have the values that you want to embody, that kind of make the types of decisions you like to make. Hang out with those people and then just see, right? You might be surprised how much that lets you own what you actually want. And then you end up feeling really comfortable, right? And you're like, oh, turns out all I needed was to hang out with people that have similar values and have similar goals. And then I feel really comfortable and I don't feel like I'm off track anymore. So that's the second thing you can do to kind of cater to your brain's natural desire for status. Find your people, expand and adjust your peer set, find a tribe that fits your values, your goals, what you're trying to do. The world is huge. The world is huge. I guarantee that your desires and your goals are not that weird, and you can find people that totally align with them. And the third thing you can do to feed your very natural desire for status is diversify your sources of status. I think our society in general, and I think certainly among the high achiever group, the singular source of status is career, right? It is your company that you work at, the title that you have, the speed of your promotion trajectory, the amount of money you're making, blah, 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 right? It's very, very like career is the singular source of status. It is like the singular monothematic investment that we all tend to make when it comes to status. I mean, you can diversify your sources of status. You can, like, I was listening to a podcast recently where someone was talking about this, and the example they gave is like, you can be a janitor at a high school, but also be the coach of of the Little League baseball team. Or you can, be working at Chipotle, but you can also be a leader in your church. Right. And so kind of just expand your view about, and of course, like I know the folks are listening to this are not working at Chipotle and are not janitors, in schools. I know you already have really like high flying, high power careers. And when the only kind of egg in your status basket is your career, and everyone around you is gunning even harder and even faster, and the goalposts keep moving about what an impressive career looks like, it can make you feel like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough. Right. And so again, you can adjust your peer group and you can kind of make sure that you're hanging out with people with similar goals and values. And I think the other thing you can do is diversify your sources of status, because your world is a lot bigger than just your career. Think about your communities, your spiritual communities, volunteer groups, other places where you can get involved. And you can have status and leadership, and you can also contribute. Again, this isn't just all about being self-serving and just kind of like bigging yourself up as much as possible. It's just about realizing, yes, I have a human brain. I have a social brain. It is going to be doing these little status checks, right? It's going to be seeing what's my standing, where am I, and am I on track, and am I good enough? That's a normal part of having a normal human brain. And knowing that you have that status-oriented brain, that's like a part of you that you can't necessarily erase. What you can do about that is, one, ask yourself these questions. If no one else was doing what I want to do, would I still want to do it? If everyone was doing what I want to do, how would I feel about it? Remove the magnet of social pressure. Let your internal compass snap into place and just get a snapshot of clarity of, this is what I actually want, right? That way you know what the truth is in terms of what you actually want. Then you can still pursue status and just know that that's why you're doing it, and calibrate the level of satisfaction you're expecting to get, right? Know that's why you're doing it. You can adjust your peer set. What does everyone mean in your brain's head? In your brain's conceptualization, you can adjust your peer sets so that you feel more normal, and you can diversify your sources of status, which to me is also diversifying the places where you add value, right? Because I do think this is one of the things I love about high achievers is, like, I think we all get a lot of like status and satisfaction and self-worth from adding value, which actually can also be a really good thing. It can be a bad thing sometimes. It can be a tremendously good thing, because it means that if you're ever feeling like I'm not quite fitting in or I'm not quite feeling good enough, you can open your eyes and say, where else can I add value? Can I add value at my kid's school? Can I add value at my church or my religious organization, in my community, in local politics, in the courses, in the causes that I want to advocate for, where in my neighborhood, right? Where can I add value? And that can actually help you diversify your identity, diversify your sources of status and your sources of meaning, and help you feed the part of your brain that does care what your ranking is, right? Like in the group and how you're perceived, that's okay. But you can kind of turn that to a more productive direction by diversifying the different sources of your status. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, kind of coming back to that purpose question, that primary question of like, do I want to be doing what I'm doing before I start optimizing productivity and performance and purpose, or productivity, performance, and stress? Let me just check in. Do I even want to be doing this? Because if I don't want to do this, everything else is moot. Let's fix the direction first. Let's start doing what I want to do first before we optimize any of the other things. And then using these questions to just pull away the magnet of social pressure and of what everyone else is doing, so you can get a clear snapshot of what it is that you want to do and really get clear on it. And then still feed the part of you that cares about, where you stand in the group. That's still possible and that's still okay. So that's what we're talking about today. And if me asking you these questions is making you realize, wait, I'm not super clear on what I want. Hey, asking me this question of, do you want to be on the path that you're on, feels like it's kind of cracked open a can of worms. Come talk to me. Come talk to me, book a free coaching consult, and let's kind of talk through. This is really the place where I was when I hired my first one-on-one coach. I don't even think I realized how interrelated all these issues were for me. I was feeling stressed out at work. I also was feeling like I wasn't doing a good job at work. And I was feeling like I wasn't super sure that I even wanted to be on this path, right? So all the factors of stress, productivity, performance, and purpose were all kind of flowing together. And they were all kind of tangled. And it was really hard for me to even figure out where do I start and what really is the root cause of this. So I totally sympathize. And I think one of the things that kind of got me into starting to work with a coach was when I asked myself that question, do I even want to be doing this? And I was like, crap, I think I don't want to be doing this. That's a huge can of worms. How do I even start picking that apart, right? And how do I feel good and feel clear about my decision to either keep doing this or not keep doing this? Because I don't want to make a rash decision. I don't want to just impulsively say, I'm bad at this, so I'm leaving. I was like, I know that's not going to solve my problems. I want to make a really clear-headed decision about whether I'm continuing down this path or not. And then I want to work through everything else as well. So just because even if your first reaction is I don't want to be doing this, that doesn't mean that you should quit your job and change your path. I want you to make a really thoughtful decision about this. That's what my coach helped me do. So if you feel like you're kind of in this place, if you feel like asking the question of, do I want to do this, is sort of opening a can of worms that you're not sure what to do, book a free coaching consult with me. Let's talk through it. Let's get that first primary question really clear and really sorted out, and we can work through everything else as well. See you guys later.
Hey guys, I'm actually adding on a little addendum to this podcast. I was thinking a little bit more about when I was talking about when you realize that a goal that you're going for or something that you want is actually status driven, right? So you have something that you really want. You ask yourself that question, if no one else was doing this, if no one else had this, would I still want it? And your brain's like, oh, I actually wouldn't want it as much if no one else had this. And you realize, oh, hang on, part of my motivation is status driven. And then what do you do about that? Right. And so I told you, hey, it's okay. You can own it, right? You can own it and say, that's fine. I'm going after this thing. It's partially status driven or it's entirely status driven. I'm still allowed to go after it. I'm just going to calibrate my expectations about the level of kind of fulfillment I'm going to feel when I get there, because often there's not a ton of fulfillment when you get to the destination if the goal is mostly driven by status rather than just you inherently wanting the thing. I want to expand on this concept a little bit because I was thinking about this last night. And I was trying to think of what's an example for me where I'm actually doing this, right? It's where I can kind of make this example come to life a little bit, because it's easy to hear me say what I just said and say, well, I would never do that. I would never just do something because it's the status, cool thing to do. I would never just own it and decide to do that. But I was like, let me think of an example, because I gave you some examples of things where on the other side of the equation, right? Things where I, think I want it. I'm struggling to own it 100% and say I want to go for it. And then I ask myself, well, if everybody was doing this, how would I feel? And I'm like, oh, that gives me a sense of permission and I can go after it. So I was thinking some more. I was like, what is something that I really want? But when I ask myself that question, well, if no one else had it, would you still want it? And I'm like, wait, crap, then I wouldn't want it as much anymore. And for me, this is a little personal, but I'm just going to go ahead and share it with you guys anyway. For me, that thing is weight loss, right? So I am a little bit overweight in terms of BMI. I also am, I'm South Indian, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease all run in my family on both sides of the family. And so I really do have to be lighter to kind of, manage my risk of all of those things.
And from totally a vanity perspective, I want to lose some weight. I have spent most of my life wanting to lose a little bit of weight. And I'm currently in that phase of my life as well. I'm not at my ideal weight. I want to lose weight. And it's one of those things I really want, right? It's not something I struggle to own. I'm like, maybe I want this, maybe I don't. I'm like, I really freaking want this, right? And so that's something I really, really want. And then if I were to ask myself that question, well, if everybody was about the same weight as you, or about the same BMI, or about the same body type, right? Like whatever would equalize the playing field, if everybody had my kind of body and kind of looked like me, would I still want to lose weight? And my honest answer, my visceral first reaction, right? Remember, capturing that visceral first reaction is really, really important before your brain starts overthinking and adding more thoughts on top of it. My visceral first reaction, if everybody looked like me and there were no skinny people in the world, my visceral first reaction is like, oh, then I wouldn't prioritize this as much. I actually wouldn't want this as much. It would be okay, right? I wouldn't care as much as I care right now. And I was like, oh crap. It's totally status driven, not entirely, right? I think the health benefits are really real, especially for someone with my genetics and my family history. No questions asked. The health aspect of it is really, really important. But if I'm totally honest with myself, about 80% of my motivation is the status motivation, right? If everybody else looked like me, then I would be like 80% less motivated to lose weight. So what do I do with that, right? I wanted to bring that example to life a little bit of like, how do I handle that? When recognizing, knowing my visceral first reaction, knowing that if I remove the magnet of like peer pressure and what everyone else is doing, my true desire snaps into place, if that compass snaps into place, and I'm like, oh crap, I actually don't want this inherently as much as I thought I did. What do I do with that? Here's how so what I'm not doing is saying, oh, screw it, I don't want to lose weight anymore. And I'm also not saying, oh, well, I now only want it 20% as much as I wanted it before. I actually am still going forward with the same level of wanting it, but let me kind of talk through how I negotiate the status aspect of it in two ways. One is I'm literally just owning, I'm doing this for the status. I'm doing this to fit in. I'm doing this to make my own life easier. I know that may not be a politically correct thing to say. I know that you might really disagree with me and you might say, no, Pooja, you should be body positive and you shouldn't think this way about yourself. And you're creating a bad example for others by saying that you want to lose weight in order to fit in. That's totally fine. You're completely entitled to your opinion. But let me tell you how I think about that. Anytime you're going against the grain, right? Anytime you're doing something that you're not going to fit in, you kind of have to make the choice of like, I'm either going to take on the mental burden of not fitting in, or I'm going to take on the mental burden of doing the work to fit in. Both of them are work, right? And you just have to decide which of the two flavors of work do you want to do. There's a lot of areas in my life where I do the work of not fitting in, right? Where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a coach when nobody I know is a coach. That's okay. I want to own that. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to stay single and I'm not going to prioritize dating, even though everyone around me seems to be doing that and ask me a lot of questions about that. That's okay. I'm going to own it and go against the grain. I don't want to have children. Most people in the world want to have children. It's another way that I'm going against the grain. So there's a bunch of things that are really important to me in terms of my goals and my lifestyle and what I want my life to look like, where it's going against the grain. And my choice is, you know what? I'm going to do the work of going ahead and going against the grain. I'm going to wrap my head around it. I'm going to trust myself. I'm going to kind of work through all the worries and fears that I have internally that I'm making a mistake. I'm going to find my peer set so that I feel like I fit in. I'm going to do that work. And then when it comes to weight loss, honestly, my thought is I don't want to do the work of feeling good about how I look. I feel good about how I look, right? I don't feel horrible about how I look, but I would enjoy being thinner. And I would enjoy wearing those clothes. And I would enjoy just like not worrying about how I look in photos and just feeling really good about how I look. And the choice I'm making, the conscious choice, right? The deliberate choice I'm making is like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and like do the work to look the way that I think I want to look. And I'm not going to do the work to love the way I look exactly right now and be like completely okay with it forever. Like I said, I like how I look. I don't hate how I look, but I would like to look a little bit different. And I'm just saying, I'm just going to do the work to do that instead of doing the work to decide that I look okay right now. That's one part of it, right? It's just owning, I'm going for it. I'm doing the thing that like will make me fit in. I'm doing the thing that will fit with whatever the current kind of conventional standards are of being attractive or looking good. I'm owning it and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do that work instead of the work of going against the grain. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to make the choice of saying I'm mostly or partially motivated by status in this goal, and I'm choosing to do the work of fitting in and going with the grain rather than choosing to do the work of going against the grain and owning my own choices. Totally fine, right? That's allowed. So that's one thing I'm doing when it comes to my weight loss goals. The second thing I'm doing when it comes to my weight loss goals, remember, I talked about often when you're motivated by status, you'll get to the end point and then you won't feel a sense of fulfillment, right? You'll be like, wait, this feels kind of hollow because I was mostly doing this to impress other people. And, like the experience of being at a certain weight or of having a promotion or working at a certain company, only 1% of that experience is like telling other people about it. And 99% of the experience is like working at that job, being at that level, maintaining your new weight and your level of fitness, right? But 99% of the work is just maintaining and being there. And 1% of the work is like flexing and telling people about it, which is why people can experience that sense of like, wait, I'm not getting the fulfillment, but I achieved this goal that was status motivated. So what I'm doing to combat that is I am really finding fulfillment in the process, right? I am not like saying I'll feel good at the end. Oh, like I'm just going to be miserable the whole way through, but once I weigh a certain amount, once I look a certain way, then I'm going to be happy. That would really set me up for that hollow lack of fulfillment feeling, which would then also probably make it really hard for me to maintain my new weight. Instead, I am really digging into every part of the process and really trying to do it in a way that feels like me and that feels fun and feels sustainable and get a lot of joy out of the process. For me personally, I'm really just leaning into my own personality. I like data, I like numbers, I like routines, I like structures. And so I have a spreadsheet that tracks like all my calories and all my weights. I have a really strict, not a strict, but like a pretty like set, like it's strict in the sense that it's boring. It's very automated. That's really what it is. I have a very automated meal plan where I just eat the same things every day. And I weigh them out and I measure them and all these things. And then I like to kind of troubleshoot, okay, what are my rules? Like, what are my kind of playbooks for different situations? If I am eating out, like over the holidays, for my birthday, for vacation, right? What's my playbook for those situations? How do I handle them? That's like a nerdy question that I enjoy thinking about, right? Kind of figuring out what's my operating model? How do I handle these kinds of situations? How do I get the joy and the enjoyment from food in these special scenarios, but also feel good about my progress towards my goals? Right. So all of that thinking is me sinking into the process and getting a lot of joy and fulfillment and sort of creative expression out of the process. I'm just saying like, I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to do this a fun way. And that's going to give me a lot of the fulfillment all along the way. So I wanted to give that to you as a concrete example of if you have something that you really strongly want, and then you ask yourself that question, well, if nobody else wanted this, if nobody else had this, would I still want it? And then your brain's like, oh crap, I wouldn't want it anymore, or I wouldn't want it nearly as strongly as I want it. And you realize that it's status motivated, right? You might hear that in theory and say, well, I would never do that, right? Or if I realize that, I would just stop going after the goal because like that would be so, like not cool of me to just do something for the status. But I wanted to give you a concrete example of how you actually can. You can have a goal, which if you're honest with yourself, you're like, yes, this is mostly or partially status driven. If nobody else had this, I wouldn't care as much about it, or I may not care about it at all. But I wanted to give you that concrete example of you can own it. You can say, yes, I'm doing this to fit in, and that's okay. I've thought about my two options of either I can do the work to fit in or I can do the work to go against the grain. And in this particular instance, I'm doing the work to fit in. And that's okay. That's a valid choice. You can make that choice. That's all right. And you can also find fulfillment in the process. Just because you're partially status motivated right now doesn't mean that it has to be a miserable journey. And then you have the expectation that all the satisfaction and all the fulfillment will come at the end. You can also change how you're thinking about the process, about the journey, about all the steps that you have to take to get there and get fulfillment from those things. Make that your arena to express your aligned ambition, to do the thing you want to do in the way that you want to do it, that feels like you, that feels fun, that feels like flow, that feels nerdy and analytical. I love being nerdy and analytical, so I love those words. That feels playful, but mostly just feels like you, right? And so you can sink into the process and make this pursuit feel really you flavored and feel really fun and get all the fulfillment every step of the way. Even if you were totally honest with yourself, you wouldn't be doing this if no one else would do this, or you wouldn't try as hard. So I want to give you guys that concrete example, because I think when we talk about status versus purpose and like what you inherently want versus what you want because, other people want it, it's easy to have some all or nothing thinking and think like, hey, the goal is I should be purely inherently motivated and status should be of no concern to me whatsoever. I should never care what other people think. Whereas I think the absolute true reality that I see in my own life and in my clients' lives is we are social creatures. Status does matter to us. And there is a cost to going against the grain. There's a cost to just saying, screw all you guys, and I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And it's not to say you never take on that cost, right? I would say in a bunch of areas of my life that are really important to me, literally in my career, in my romantic relationships, and in my parenting. Right? 3 really huge areas. I have made the big decision to be like, I'm going against the grain. I'm doing it my way. And like, nobody might get it. And like, none of my like normal peer set might get it. And I have to go make new friends to like, find people who get it. And so there's big areas in my life where I've said, I've got to do it my way. I've got to go against the grain and do what I think is right. And it's also okay to have areas of your life where you're like, listen, this is not worth the work of going against the grain. This isn't important enough to me to do the work of going against the grain. I'm just going to do the work of going with the grain. That's okay. I'm just going to chase the status, and I'm going to mitigate some of that fulfillment problem, right? Of like not getting a sense of fulfillment when you achieve a status-oriented goal or a status-motivated goal. I'm going to mitigate that by really like angling my brain and doing the work to get the fulfillment of from the process. But I just wanted to add a little nuance and kind of tell you, listen, you're in a status-driven world. Your brain is going to compare you to everyone else who's around you. And it's okay sometimes to say, I'm doing the work of going with the grain. And I wanted to give you a concrete example of what that might look like. Okay, that's the addendum to the podcast. I just wanted to add this on because I was thinking about this last night and I was like, I think I can make this come alive a little bit more and add a little bit of nuance here. So I just wanted to add that for you guys. I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Aligned Ambition podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and share this podcast with anyone you know that you think could use it. If you'd like to explore working together in a one-on-one coaching engagement with me, book a free consult call at poojavcoaching.com/contact. You can grab that link in the episode description. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or topics you want me to cover in this podcast, shoot me an email at pooja@poojavcoaching.com. You can grab that in the episode description too. Talk to you soon.